All right, Shalawam. Before I begin this lesson, I would like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahawah, Yahawashi, BAHASHAM, Qadash, and double honor to the elders and the apostles of GMS. And my Hebrew name is Mayam. This is going to be a part two of a video I did this week concerning natural Gentiles versus Israelites, or natural Gentiles versus Israelites. So, part one, I went into who the natural Gentiles are. In this one, I'm going to go into who the or Israelites are that are, called like Gentiles or foreigners, or considered Gentiles or foreigners. And I want to go into Exodus chapter. I'll start with this one first. Exodus chapter 2. So this is going to be a part two, or part two. Exodus chapter 2 and verse 21, and the point is in 22. And I want to go into that word stranger or strange. So this is Exodus 2 and 21. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses Zipporah his daughter, and she bare him a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. And I believe this is when Moses had fled from Egypt after he had finished smiting an Egyptian or a Hamite. And he fled to the land of Midian. All right, so Gershom. Actually, let's go into this word Gershom first. All right, because it's important to know these things. A natural Gentile versus a unnatural Gentile. Right, because you had Israelites in the New Testament being called foreigners or being called Gentiles. And it's the reason why we bring out precepts and scriptures like this. And this is 8:16:47 𝐤𝐄𝐅 in the Hebrew, 𝐤𝐿, which simply means foreigner. 𝐤𝐿, which simply means foreigner. Okay, and it also was the 𝐤𝐿, the name of four Israelites. 𝐤𝐿. There's no O's in the Hebrew, but it's God, the Rod, the Shah, and the Ma. 𝐤𝐿. Firstborn son of Moses and Zipporah. Firstborn son of Levi. Right. So you had Israelites, a few Israelites that were named 𝐤𝐿. So now when you go into this word stranger, it's 8:16:16 gar. Gar, which simply means sojourner, a temporary inhabitant, a newcomer lacking inherited rights of foreigners in Israel, though conceded rights. So Moses was a stranger, okay, in the land of Egypt, as well in the land of Midian. And that's where he bore this son at, or where Zipporah had this son. And this was Moses' firstborn son, 𝐤𝐿. So Gar could represent an Israelite. And this word for strange land, well, I don't want to get into that, but it's Nakar, right? Because Egypt was the land of heathens. Okay, Nakar, natural Gentiles. Right, that was given to the sons of Ham, Mizraim. Okay, let's see. That's why you have laws like in Exodus chapter 12. I'm not gonna like go in deep into it, but I will explain this. You have laws in like Exodus chapter 12, how to act towards your Israelite brother. Actually, I'm gonna have to briefly go into it. I'm gonna have to briefly go into. I'll read it, but not like deep into it. But I'm gonna have to read it. So this is Exodus chapter 12, and this was when we left Egypt. This was going to be a law that applied to us. When we left Egypt, we would have to keep like the Passover or the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And there was requirements that came with it. If you were not an Israelite, you could not eat of the Passover. But if you were an Israelite, you could. Actually, before I grab this, where's the one stranger? Stranger. That's not afflict a stranger that dwelleth amongst thee. Actually, let's grab. Okay, Genesis 15:3, right? I believe it's the one in Leviticus and the laws. Shall any stranger sojourn? Right, okay. It could be this one. A country he shall both wash his clothes. Okay, about 19. Stranger in your land. Okay. This is the perfect one. Leviticus chapter 19 And I'll start at verse 33. And this is in the book of the laws. And if a stranger sojourn with thee in your land, he shall not vex him. So, right, because you had when we were established in the land of Israel, right, or in the land of Canaan, which later on became known as Israel, you still had Israelites that were living amongst the heathens in other like faraway lands, like Terah. Abraham's father was one of them. You had our forefather Laban. He's one of them. You had Bethuel, but you still had other Israelites that were living in faraway lands. So it says if a stranger, meaning bright, because a lot of Israelites during the time of Yahawashi, especially like the Pharisees and the Sadducees, hated Israelite foreigners that lived outside of the land of like Judea or Israel. They looked down on them. But in the laws it says this, Leviticus chapter 19, that's why Yahawashi commanded the apostles to go to these Israelite foreigners to teach them and to show them the right path, right? Because they can be grafted back in, whether they were serving false gods, or whether they were worshiping false gods, celebrating these holidays and not holy days. Okay, Yahawashi was bringing them back into the fold, into that household of faith, or cleaning them up, so to speak. Okay, washing them with His word, and that's what's happening. Even now, we had to be washed from our filthiness, and from this filthy, polluted society. Yahawashi had to cleanse us, right? But because you had a lot of Israelites back then too that were being called Greeks or being called Gentiles. They're like, I'm an Israelite. There's like something new to them, to their ears. I'm an Israelite. And the apostles say, yes, you're an Israelite. Get right. And look, so it's Leviticus 19:33, and if a stranger sojourn with thee in your land, he shall not vex him. You see that? But the stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you, and thou shalt love him as thyself. That's what it's talking about when it says love your neighbor. All right. For ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your power. So when you go into that word stranger, once again, it's gar. 8:16:16. It's gar. 8:16:16. H:16:16. Sojourner, a temporary inhabitant, a newcomer lacking inherited rights. All right. So I don't want to make this video too complex here. What does it mean to vex? To look down, to oppress, suppress. Don't you got a lot of Israelites now? They look at like Israelite foreigners. Like if you don't look like a so-called black man or a Wesley Snipes looking dude or a Cedric the Entertainer looking dude, you're going to be looked down upon. Like, he's not an Israelite because he doesn't have woolly hair. He doesn't have the same skin complexion as I do. So to certain Israelites, you're not one of them, right? But you have to understand the Israelites were scattered amongst these nations as foreigners. They were sojourning amongst these other nations. So they started picking up their customs. They even looked like the heathen nations. But the scriptures tell you to clearly not oppress your neighbor, your Israelite brother. Treat violently, maltreat, vex, to do wrong. And the word for stranger, right? Stranger, for sojourn is still gawar, still means the same thing. To sojourn, abide, dwell with, dwell in, dwell with, remain, and have to be a stranger, be continuing sorely. To sojourn, dwell for a time, to abide, stay, temporarily, dwell. To stir, okay. And what else? Other word can I get? All right, and that was it. So the word gar, you could attach that to an Israelite foreigner. The word gar. Gar simply means a sojourner. Aren't we sojourners here in America? This is not our land. This is the land what? Well, I've dealt, like Moses said about Egypt. I've been a sojourner in a strange land. Let's go back to that. It says here, and she bare him a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a stranger in a strange land. America is a strange land. It's a gloomy, dark land. Okay? Egypt was a dark land for the Israelites. It was gloomy. Right? We were being oppressed for 400 years and back in ancient Egypt. Right? Here in America, we've been in slavery till now. For over 400 and something plus years. Right? What else? Right, you got Israelites literally scattered all over, but God will represent an Israelite foreigner, and that's it. All right, so Nakar in part 1 will represent, or Nakar Yahawath will represent an actual heathen. Okay, and I explained to you also in part 1 that Israelites were practicing or following the customs of the heathen, so they became they were considered to be like a heathen to the Most High, like the Nakar, like these non-Israelites, right? Because we were following their customs. But you could apply that to a natural Gentile. I mean, a natural heathen nation, or natural, right? So with that, Lord willing, this was edifying. Shalom.